Okay. Welcome everyone. Call to order at 6:00 p.m. for our February 16th, 2021 meeting. Wendy, will you do roll call?
Mayor Turco.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Appleby.
Here.
Councilmember Bates.
Here.
Councilmember Doby.
Here.
Councilmember Nafolda.
Here.
Okay, Councilmember Doby will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. Everybody stand with me. Right hand over your heart. Miss Wendy put up a flag for us. On go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Councilmember Bates will give the invocation.
Certainly. Dear Lord, bless us all and continue to help our country come together to solve the common problems in an orderly, intelligent, and responsive manner. For these things we ask in your name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Next, we have a 5A, which is a presentation regarding the Orange County Human Relations Annual Report, provided by Board Member Susanna Carranza.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of OCHR just to share just a little update here with you tonight. So I represent the nonprofit organization OCHR and wanted to just share with you some of the work we've done for Los Alamitos. At OCHR, we really believe that all people have the right to live free from discrimination and violence. So we provide programs to create a safe and respectful community, such as your own. And then OCHR also partners with cities to manage challenging issues. And we know with a lot of what's been going on since last year and even beyond, prior to that with the civil unrest, it's been more important to make sure that we support the community in any way that we can. So some of the examples is that we've been working with households on mediation and really helping families neighbor to neighbor conflicts. As the pandemic has really kind of changed the way that, we engage our communities, even, with our call here today. The support is mostly possible because of the City Dues program. And this program was developed over 30 years ago with the City Managers Association. Cities across the county can make a per capita contribution to our nonprofit to maintain our capacity to respond and support cities when needed. So we're hoping that Los Alamitos will not hesitate to reach out to us, to get our support and our expertise. And just some examples, we have been able to mediate 5 court intake cases, 1 community intake case, and 1 police community mediation that included some city of Los Alamitos residents. In collaboration with the County of Orange, local law enforcement agencies, schools and communities, and residents, we do also document hate crimes, and that's something that we've been able to do year after year so we can track and see how that's doing. Most recently, we supported the Los Alamitos School District in the creation of Human Relations Task Force, which is still working to support safe and respectful schools in the city. So really here, just to share that, we appreciate the opportunity to work in your city, a reminder that we're here if you need our support. And then we'll be sending our annual report just as a reminder so you can see the work that we have been doing, at least in the most recent year.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Susanna? Susanna, thank you for the presentation and thank you for the work that you do in the community, including here in Los Alamitos. It is appreciated.
Well, thank you. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we've got oral communications. Wendy, do we have anyone who wishes to speak tonight?
We did not receive any requests to speak this evening.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to council announcements next, and we'll pick on, let's see, we'll pick on Jordan first.
Okay, last month I attended the new mayors and city council members training. Pretty interesting. It was informative. It was over the course of 4 days. They broke it up into 2 weeks. And I gotta say, some of those situational hypotheticals, if there's some councils out there that are anything like that, I'm so fortunate to be with you guys. So, it was very informative and entertaining at the same time. That's all I have to report.
You're giving us the benefit of the doubt, Jordan. You don't know us all well enough.
Yeah, it was some pretty wild examples.
All right. Councilmember Bates from Hawaii.
Just as a comment, Jordan, I had the privilege of working in southeast cities in southeast LA County for quite a few years. And I can assure you all those examples are probably very realistic, and many of them came from those locations. So yeah, quite a difference in, I think, how certainly we do business in Los Alamitos. I was just going to say that Jordan and I attended a meeting of the Library Advisory Board that was very informative. I think I'm replacing the mayor, and I think it went well. They've got seem to have a good organization. We get a lot of communications from them, and are trying, I think, to be supportive of students in schools and getting students materials that will, help them further their education. But certainly it's a challenge for everyone. So I just thought I'd bring that up and make a note for everybody that our libraries are trying to do a good job in supporting our students.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Doby.
All right. Y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I had to put my headset on because I've got children roaming free range. So let me see. I attended a chamber breakfast. That was excellent. Lots of improvisation going on. I think it was outstanding. I attended the Human Relations Committee meeting. So a lot of the information that Susanna was sharing, I actually get firsthand. I was appointed to be the alternate for the SCAG and OCOG seat. So that's pretty cool. And I attended my OC Vectors board meeting. And I just have to say, they are one of the coolest boards. They do this annual like meet and greet for all of their board chairs. They bring out Habitat Burger and they bring out all these exhibits. You get to see the mosquitoes, you get to see the trucks, and we can't do that this year. So today I opened my mail and I have a gift card to Habitat Burger, you know what I'm talking about, the burger place, so that for our next meeting I can go and get a burger and we can kind of pretend that we're still able to be together. So they're full of fun stuff like that. So that, I think, is all of that's what I've been up to. And having a wonderful Valentine's Day, which I'm sure all of y'all did too.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hasselbrink.
Yeah, not a whole lot going on. I mean, just OCFA meeting. We're starting a new ad hoc committee that I'm chairing regarding the cash contract cities, the ones that aren't structural fire funds, so they actually have to budget for their fire services. Placentia was one of those, and we've got 8 others. So we're looking at how we can make sure that their costs gets reined in so they don't hit the punch, because they're kind of getting a double dip right now with between fire authority increases and sheriff increases, a lot of them have. So we're trying to be very cognizant of that to make sure that the JPA stays viable throughout the next 9-10 years when everybody can renew at that point. So just want to thank Chief Roberts. We've had some incidences lately in the neighborhoods, and he's kept everybody updated and current. I actually know about it from him before I see it on Nextdoor, so kudos to him for scooping Nextdoor, because they're usually in the know immediately. And then just the Parks and Recs, I'm getting more and more compliments about, just the programs and the creativity of the programs, just to keep people of all ages engaged, not just the young ones, but the seniors. And it's just that even if they're not participating, they just think it's really cool that they're finding very creative ways to keep everybody engaged in some really odd times. So kudos to Park and Rec for continuing just exceeding expectations. So yeah, I think that's it for me now.
Thank you. I will try not to go on too long. I've got a few things to report. I attended the Orange County Sanitation District monthly directors meeting, orientation for new directors, and a meeting of the administration committee as well. I met with City Manager Chet Simmons to discuss preliminary discussion on the budget. We're going to start our budget standing committee meetings soon. And I look forward to that process. We're going to also look at how the 2020 to 2021 budget is looking with COVID, decreased sales tax revenue, and the implementation of Measure Y later this year. I participated in the last couple of weekly calls with the county, the Orange County CEO and the Orange County Health Director, Dr. Chow. The latest news on COVID is that the numbers are still high, but they're much improved. Particularly the positivity rate has decreased a lot. The case rates are still high. Hospitals are doing much better. And now a lot of the hospital systems are getting involved with vaccinations. So that's great. The county is using 100% of all vaccines they get on a weekly basis. The weekly county allotment, and this is separate from like Kaiser and CVS, UC Irvine, things like that. But the weekly county allotment went up from 37,000 doses to 40,000 doses. Again, they're using 100% each week. Other providers are now vaccinating. Kaiser, CVS, Walgreens, UC Irvine, the county pods are the main method by which the county's distributing vaccine. The Johnson & Johnson single dose vaccine is likely to be approved perhaps end of February. It's not certain, but this is what the health director believes. This would result in a nice increase in additional vaccines in March. Right now, the super pods can do a lot more than they are doing, but they're constrained by vaccine availability. So hopefully that situation will improve a lot coming into March. We're still in tier 1A, and senior 65 and older is the biggest group that's being vaccinated right now. So if you're in that group, make sure you check any of the facilities that I just mentioned, any of the organizations I just mentioned, the Athena app and the state's My Turn app as well, although I checked on that today and there was nothing available. I checked for folks 65 and older, and nothing was coming up in LA for that one. I think they're only going to have a site in LA at first around here. City Manager Simmons, I know you'll be giving your report next, but I know you visited the SoCA site recently and maybe even helped out. What was your impression of the SoCA pod?
So thank you, sir. Actually, I was at the Disneyland pod just because it was closer. We had a few people that actually went down to the SoCA pod for us, two of our other employees. So we've got a good feeling as to what exactly the operational tempo looks like on site. Anyone who has a family member or friends who have been through the site, everyone complimented that it's really, truly efficient. Once people are on site, they're able to move people through quickly. And really, the day that I was there, they set a record for the number of shots that they were actually able to administer. I don't think I had anything to do with that. But that being said, they clearly do have the capacity to put more people through these lines. And so it just echoes kind of what you were getting at, that the scarcity of the vaccine at the moment is probably the most determinative factor in what we're dealing with.
Right. Thank you. I also participated in the weekly mayor's meetings. This is all the mayors in Orange County get together for a weekly Zoom call. We discussed a lot of the issues affecting Orange County, in particular COVID. There's a lot of discussions about COVID, as well as some of the unfunded state mandates, including the regional housing needs assessments and some other related items. On the COVID front, I put my name as mayor on a letter from the county and from the mayors to the Senate and to the House Majority and Minority Leaders requesting passage of funding in the HEROES Act for lost revenue as a result of COVID, as well as reimbursement for COVID-related expenditures and additional allotment of COVID-19 vaccines for Orange County. So hopefully that'll help make some progress on that front. and we'll see whether we get some more funding, and I'm confident the vaccine allotments will be going up moving forward. What else? Next week, the city manager Simmons and I will be speaking to the Los Alamitos Chamber of Commerce, so I'm looking forward to that. And then just one point is that during our January meeting, we received a presentation regarding SB 1383. This is the organic waste reduction requirements. So, you know, it's a very complicated scenario. I know the city has tried to put out some information about this, and one of the images that was put out was an image of 6 trash cans. I don't think, and City Manager Simmons or anyone else can correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think the idea is that we're going to end up with 6 trash cans in front of our homes. But this is the subject. These new regulations. I guess they're not that new, from 2016. But these regulations are the subject of 3 upcoming community meetings. We're not going to be discussing this tonight. Item, I think it was, let me see, 10F. No, it's not 10F. It's 10D regarding beverage container recycling. I don't believe that that's related to SB 1383. Is that correct, City Manager Simmons?
You are correct,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, I know we received a communication on that. So just to be clear, that's not being discussed tonight. That will be discussed at the community meetings tomorrow night. You can look on the city website for information about that. Also February 22nd and March 1st as well. So anyone who's curious about that, again, the idea is, you know, we're not going to end up with 6 bins in front of our house. Probably not 5 bins, you know, hopefully not even 4 bins. But it is a complex set of regulations that we as a city are going to have to comply with. So I would encourage you, if you're watching this and you're curious, to attend one of those meetings. And also feel free to look back at the video of the January meeting, during which time we discussed this at length.
Mayor, if I can,
Yes.
Mayor, I would just point out at the meetings, if you have the opportunity, that again, you know, this is the good state looking after us, and not that it's not a great idea, but where's the money? You know, and I mean, that's really the issue, is they're providing a state mandate without the money to implement it, trying to force us to charge our residents to implement it, which is just, in my mind, very unfair. And I think and appreciate your taking the effort to write the letters and let the state know that we're not very happy, guys. If you want to do something like this, and great, we agree with you, fund it, buddy. Don't just dump it on the cities and then ask us to go and charge our residents to do it. So enough said. Thanks.
I agree. Thank you, Councilmember Bates. That's it for my report. Next, we can move on to items from the city manager.
Thank you, sir, and I'll keep these brief. As you mentioned, the information for those community meetings with regards to SB 1383 are on our website, along with the Zoom links for anyone who is interested. Like you said, this is a complicated issue that is full of unfunded mandates from the state. So obviously, staff will do everything that we are able to do to ensure that we do not have 6 or 5 bins in front of everybody's house at this moment. Number 2, just wanted to report that earlier this month, I did attend the city managers conference hosted by the league. I'm sure at this point, staff is tired of all the new ideas that came from that meeting. So we are judiciously moving through those and trying to see what exactly we can apply here and then bring them forward to the city council for consideration. But a lot of good information spread over 3 days during that first week of February. And then lastly, just would like to welcome the chief back to the fold. So Chief, glad to have you. And thank you, Mayor.
Welcome back. Thank you. And welcome back, Chief. We are happy to see you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Next up are the warrants. Can I get a motion to approve the warrants?
So moved.
I will second.
Some questions, if we may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sorry about that. Go ahead, Councilmember Bates.
Sure. The first question is, and I mentioned this to the city manager, I think it would be appropriate to change the way we're dating the warrants. If you look at that first page, it says February 18th to March 14th. Well, these warrants don't cover that period, and I kind of understand what they're trying to do by using that time frame, but I think it does confuse the issue. And in my mind, it just needs to be more specific. If the warrants are through a particular date, let's just mention that one date. That would be my suggestion. And then secondly, as you know, and I know a lot of classes in Parks and Rec have been canceled, but maybe Emily could share with us, or Craig, why so much difference in the amount that's being refunded to all the applicants? I would have expected to see, like if we terminated one class, a number of refunds that would all be the same amount going back to residents. Now, maybe it's because there's more than one kid attending the class, but maybe they could explain that to us a little.
I can explain, Councilmember Bates. The classes all vary in pricing, and anywhere from, just a single class that's maybe 4 or 5 weeks long to our preschool, which could be in the $400 range. So it just varies. And then you're right, there are siblings in families, so they will, do a refund back for 3 children in a program, et cetera.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Bates, are you okay with us moving forward to approve the warrants then?
Yes, sir.
Modification. Okay, and we had a motion and a second. City Clerk Kingston, can we move forward with roll call?
Mayor Turco,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hasselbrink,
Aye.
Councilmember Bates,
Aye.
Councilmember Doby,
Aye.
Councilmember Nafolda.
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 10, consent calendar. All consent calendar items may be acted upon by one motion unless a council member requests separate action on a specific item. Are there any items that anyone wishes to pull?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question, or maybe we should pull it, or just a question on 10F?
Yeah, go ahead. We can do that, and then we'll approve the
all of them. Okay, sure. My question on 10F is simply this: is that when we're talking about the bike lane on Howard, the improvement that is there, I think it's between Reagan and Maple Street. I'm just wondering, does it make any sense at the same time, and maybe this is already included, that we would include the markings for the bike lanes that we talk about later in the agenda under the active transportation plan? So that's my question. Has that been considered, and should that be incorporated into this project? Maybe it already has been.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'm going to actually direct that question to Chris Kelly. But before I start, just wanted to say that while we are taking into account a lot of the active transportation goals that the city has set forth within the proposed framework, obviously not having it adopted yet, I'll say it this way, it's a consideration. However, it is not a hard, fast line that we're doing our planning against. But Chris, if you wouldn't mind to expand upon that.
Hi, yes. So the Howard Avenue plans do not incorporate the bikeways, as Chet said. We can do that when they're adopted. We can do large segments at the same time, so the paint is fresh too, and it's cohesive. Right now, the only replacement is going to be stop bars and legends, the existing striping that's out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, unless someone wants to pull another item or has questions, we're looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move it.
Second.
We'll do roll call. Mayor Turco,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hasselbrink,
Aye.
Member Bates,
Aye.
Councilmember Doby,
Aye.
Councilmember Nafulda.
Aye.
Thank you. Discussion item number 11 next. The active transportation plan presentation and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments before I turn the presentation over to Ron Noda. First is, this has been a process that's been in place for about 9 months now. And so obviously there's been a significant amount of work that's gone into this to this point. Outreach to the community and trying to incorporate as much of that data back into the overall plan. Important distinction, what you are going to see tonight is a draft. That is, it is an accumulation of the data that we have gotten to date. We also have had an opportunity to speak with a number of council members, planning commissioners, traffic commissioners and such, and we're in the process of incorporating some of those comments into the document. Some of those comments have not yet been incorporated, but they shall be before it's brought back to the council for your consideration and approval. Today, we obviously have Ron, who will be able to take you through a number of the different elements that are within the plan. And then also Jacob from our consulting team, who will be able to give you kind of a timeline and a view of how exactly we arrived at this point to today. But again, important just point of reference is that this is not a final plan. This is a document that is still in the works that will be brought back to you for consideration once we've incorporated all of your comments tonight and some of the comments that we are still receiving from your colleagues and from the different stakeholders. Ron?
Thank you, Chet. Good evening, Council. So the active transportation plan, the ATP, has been a 10-month process, so we're coming down to an end here. So the ATP team consisted of city staff led by our project manager, which is our associate planner, Tom Oliver. And then we also have Jacob Leon and his team, and then he'll go over the other members, but we also have SCAG and another group called Latino Health Access, LHA. And so he'll go over that and give a little bit more detail on that. But again, the ATP plan is a plan that we set to get feedback from council members, commissioners. We have a community advisory council where we nominated one commissioner from each traffic, planning, and parks and rec to sit on this. We got community feedback. And so now the team have gathered all that into this draft form. And again, I just want to reiterate that, we're going to revise the report and then bring it back to council at a later date with the final revisions and everything. But again, the ATP plan is to encourage residents and make the city of Los Alamitos more bikeable, walkable friendly, and encourage residents to walk and bike to local parks, schools, and bus stops, businesses, etc. So again, I want to introduce Jacob, and then Jacob will take it from here to lead us through the presentation. And then again, stop us at any time if you have any questions or comments, okay? So take it away, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Ron. I appreciate it. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Jacob Leon, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all tonight to provide an update and a summary of all of the planning efforts that have gone in place for this active transportation plan. It's been a really fun journey and challenging in some aspects, right, with the world of COVID that we all had to adapt to. But I'm just happy to say that we've arrived at this point where we were able to put together a report that's really going to set the stage for the near and midterm futures of Los Alamitos when it comes to walking and biking and access to transit. Like Ron mentioned, my name is Jacob Leon. I acted as project manager for this active transportation plan. I work with KTUA. We are an urban planning and landscape architecture firm located down in San Diego, but I've had the pleasure over the last 8 years to work all over Orange County and Riverside, San Bernardino counties. And so, again, it was a pleasure to work and get to know your community and your streets and the opportunities and regarding, active transportation. I'm joined here by Juan Alberto, who was assistant project manager who helped me throughout the project. And Joe Punstland will be jumping on shortly. He was the principal in charge. So what we have for you today is approximately a 15-minute presentation where I'm going to walk you through the highlights of certain milestones of the active transportation plan. And really, it's about having an open dialogue and conversation. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you whether there are concerns or whether there are opportunities whether they're, dream big or literal and small. I'm here to listen and gather all of that so that we can address them, make edits if we need to the final report, and have you guys be on your way to start pursuing and planning and getting some money to get some projects on the ground. So with that being said, Ron, I believe I'm ready to go ahead and start presenting. Great. Okay. One moment. There we go. Alrighty. We're good, Ron? Yes? Perfect. Thank you so much. So this project, the Active Transportation Plan, was all made possible thanks to a grant that the city received by the Southern California Association of Governments. So a big thanks to them for providing the funding available to make this active transportation possible. It was a team effort. We had staff members from your city participating throughout the whole 10 months, as well as actively also our representative from Southern California Association of Governments, which was very refreshing to have somebody highly involved in the whole 10-month process from their end. We also had a sub-consultant, LHA, who are based out of Santa Ana, who we've worked with on several other projects. They provided a lot the outreach coordination for this project. And so a big thanks to them as well for sticking through and providing insight into how we could adapt community engagement during this world of COVID. As just mentioned, the Active Transportation Plan really is about making improvements to provide safer and more reliable mobility choices for people who are walking, biking, taking transit, and even driving and using rideshare. The master plan, the report itself, contains an existing conditions analysis, a summary of all of the community engagement that took place, the infrastructure and program recommendations, as well as funding and grant sources that are available at a local, state, and federal level. It really is meant to be a comprehensive, analysis of existing conditions and, next steps for the future. Regarding existing conditions, this is something that is absolutely critical for any planning process. It's really understanding the data that is available. When we combine that with actual field work, taking visits to Los Alamitos and walking and experiencing the streets themselves to really understand how things are looking like right now, addressing and observing the challenges and opportunities. Things like land use, collisions, previously and existing bikeway projects, as well as where bikeway projects or walking corridors connect with your neighboring cities. All of that was taken into consideration. Many of these data inputs come together in what we call a propensity model, which is essentially a needs assessment. It's a model that essentially tells our team and your staff here at Los Alamitos where the team should focus their efforts on for recommendations, for field work, etc. I'm just going to go over just 3 maps that were important as part of this process. Again, beginning with what is currently on the ground, what do you have available as of the start of this project? So it was understanding that there's a lot of room for growth, that there aren't many bikeway projects currently in Los Alamitos, and this active transportation plan is a big priority will be to fill in those gaps and assess where we can add more. And this map is also really important because you get to see the bike networks in cities like Cypress and your communities like Rossmore and Long Beach, and how Los Alamitos will hopefully not be a gap, but it'll be a continuous, flow between your neighboring cities and for your own residents. Activity center, so land use and zoning, all of that is very important for an active transportation plan because it's about where do people live and where would they like to go without having to drive everywhere. And so part of this was understanding your schools, your parks, as well as all of these other commercial and civic destinations within your city, so we can try to understand what routes may make sense to recommend in this master plan. And collisions is a really important thing to also always try to understand. Whether there are truly accidents is one thing, and whether there are collisions due to infrastructure, the conditions of everyday life is another thing. And so for us at K2A, it's always important to map out where collisions are taking place so that we can then verify and focus and see what the conditions are on the street, so that it could just be safer for everybody who's walking, biking, or driving. And as you can see in this map, it's no surprise, unfortunately, sadly, that Los Alamitos Boulevard and Catella do experience high collision rates just due to the sheer number of the volume and traffic that that those corridors experience. Regardless, though, it's important to just visually see it as we plan out things. So that was a short version of many other types of maps that that we analyze and we produce for this, all of which I'm sure you've had a chance to see in the actual draft report itself. But now I want to also discuss how we balance data with community engagement, because it's important to not just work in silos, to understand that data is important, but we also want to hear and listen to the community, your commissions, council members like yourselves, and all kinds of other stakeholders, so we can try to have a balanced approach for planning and an active transportation plan. So with COVID, we kicked off this project, right in the middle of COVID. And so immediately, thankfully, SCAG was very flexible and open to allowing us to adjust and modify things to still meet the requirements of community engagement in this, while, realizing that in May and over the summer that we couldn't have in-person workshops, the traditional types of outreach that we're all used to and that we all personally love to do. But at the end of the day, I'm very thankful for your community. They were very actively engaged in spite of the conditions that we all had to address. And here's a summary of this infographic that you see here. We had over 100 people complete the project survey. We mailed out over 1,200 postcards to residents within the city. We did complete 3 workshops. They were online, but we still had 3 workshops and they were well attended. We had a website that was created just for this active transportation plan, and we had an interactive map there, and we received over 250 comments, again, outstanding. We also had access to a text messaging service thanks to LHA. So we were able to send out periodic text message blasts to remind people, take the survey or make sure you join us on Zoom for community workshop number 2, those kinds of things. And so I think that came in really handy, especially with the attendance numbers that we saw. As Ron mentioned earlier, we had a really engaged community advisory committee, your own commissioners, as well as representatives from the schools and parks, as well as SCAG and OCTA. They all participated, and honestly, it was one of the best community advisory committees I've personally worked with. And so a big kudos to them for being involved throughout all this process. And lastly, I do want to mention that towards the end of the project, LHA was able to conduct 2 pop-up events. So they were able to go to Little Cottonwood Park, as well as 2 of the shopping centers along Los Alamitos Boulevard and Catella, to hand out flyers and encourage people to go to the website and to provide comments. I want to quickly highlight some of the results that we captured from the survey itself and things that align with our observations, and as well as help justify some of the things that we want to think about. So people are mostly driving to work and school, as you can see here. Overwhelmingly are choosing to drive to work and school. But when it comes to recreation, you do see a more even split. So people are choosing to walk and bike to their local park, and so that in itself is very consistent across other Southern California cities that we work with. There's a lot to talk about there culturally, right? Where a parent may not want to have their kid walk or bike to the school, but on a weekend where the whole family can go out to a park together and they may choose to walk or bike together. So, it's so many things are involved with, results like this that make sense and correlate with what we see every day. That being said, though, you do have a good number of people who are choosing to bike more than once, as you can see here in the top left corner. If you combine the 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 days per week, that's, about half of people who took the survey said that they do bike in Los Alamitos. Though they do it for recreation, as seen in that pie chart on the top right corner. The overwhelming majority are doing it for recreation, not out of necessity. We asked the question where they would like to see better pedestrian and bicycling routes to. Schools and parks and shopping centers are number 1. And it's honestly that these are always the top 3 choices. That's where people want to see improvements to. The last 2 that I want to share is, what would make it easier for you to bike more in Los Alamitos? Bike lanes and bike paths and bike parking were all the top results under this question. And for better and easier walking throughout your city, just having nice, wide, convenient sidewalks, continuous sidewalks, and crosswalks were, towards the top. It's a pretty even split, but those are usually the ones that rise to the top. So again, throughout the 10-month process, we did all the community engagement. And again, I was very happy to just see the involvement from all stakeholders and community members. All of that feedback, though, brought us to today, right? This master plan that has bikeway recommendations that will hopefully help you start pursuing and implementing some of these bikeway projects. So for the last section of this presentation, I divided it between the bikeway recommendations as well as an explanation on how we're addressing the walking and pedestrian recommendations. But I'll begin with bikeways. And this image you see right here, I use all the time, and it's very important because for me, for our team, it's important to understand the street's potential. And so what that means is that many times cities were overbuilt their travel lanes and their streets, meaning that, and in an example like this, you have travel lanes that are just wider than they need to be. You have parking lanes that are wider than they need to be. But without taking a closer look, like we did during an active transportation plan, can we start to see, is there more potential to make walking and biking improvements without affecting the travel lanes or even your other constraints? The idea of not touching center medians, the idea of not touching the sidewalks, so only working between curb and curb, are all kinds of constraints and things that we always have to address with every day when it comes to types of projects. But what it is, once we really start to understand the street's potential, you have a condition like this, where before the travel lanes were overbuilt, but by simply restriping, kind of like how you're doing on Howard, that's a modified example, right? Where let's say Howard was just a bigger street. When you decide to slurry seal and do new overlay and you're ready to stripe down a bike lane, that's how, when you do these kinds of things, that's considered low-hanging fruit, because by just making the travel lanes the size that the minimum size they need to be, you've now gained, in this example, this hypothetical example, the ability to add buffered bike lanes on this corridor. And so this is a condition that is very, very common in Southern California, especially, Orange County and other communities like that. And this example was present here in Los Alamitos. So hopefully these two graphics help understand the meat and potatoes of an active transportation plan when it comes to bikeway projects. As a quick reminder for everybody on the call, there are 4 main types of bicycle project types. You have your Class 1 multi-use paths. This is like your Coyote Creek Bikeway, the classic fully separated bike path that people can walk, bike, and do what they like. Fully, you don't have to be on the street or be near anybody. So you have a great example within your city with Coyote Creek right there. Class 2 bike lanes. These are your typical standard 5 to 6 foot wide bike lanes that are on the street. Class 3 bike routes. These are the conditions where we would classify low volume, low traffic streets, such as Green, Farquhar, Howard, those kinds of streets, where you say, hey, these are low volume or low traffic streets. By putting sharrows or stencils down on the ground, you can designate these corridors as safer corridors for people. And so that's what these Class 3 bike routes are. The reason you see the / neighborhood greenway right there is that many communities are upgrading these Class 3 bike routes, and they're calling them neighborhood greenways because they add additional traffic calming things like little mini roundabouts or curb extensions or local, crosswalk art. Fun things like stuff like that really goes a long way as you start to brand and really take ownership of a certain neighborhood's local streets. Lastly, the Class 4 bike route. This is something that has finally gained track here in Southern California. Cities like up in Washington, Oregon, New York have been doing them forever. But you have these physically separated bikeways. Your own neighbors over in Long Beach have many examples of these separated protected bikeways around their downtown area. This is something that there isn't anything Class 4 recommended within Los Alamitos, but it doesn't mean that you can't take any of the recommended Class 2 bikeways and in the future upgrade them to Class 4 separated bikeways if the room allows for them. And these colors that you see here, the red, blue, green, purple, mostly just the red, blue, and green, they correlate with the map I'm going to show you in a few seconds. So essentially, as we compiled and we visited Los Alamitos and we had conversations with city stakeholders, and we were able to develop these 18 recommended projects for this active transportation plan. In addition to just identifying the routes, we also ranked them using a data-driven analysis where we use things like census data, stakeholder engagement, and staff input to see what would be a more important corridor from a data standpoint for the city to address. Prioritization is very, very important. Caltrans, SCAG, they all like to see projects ranked because it helps them allocate and it shows the city that they're trying to get bang for their buck. And it makes sense when you're asking for money, they want to see that you're using it wisely. So prioritization is absolutely important when it comes to these active transportation plans. And I'd be curious, once we have our open discussion in a few minutes, what you think. But I personally, from what I came to learn from your community and in conversations with Tom and Ron, I think the top 10 projects all land, pretty appropriately. We know that Catella, Bloomfield, Cerritos, Los Al, those are very important corridors. So they all rank very highly because of what they do, how they serve your community. But you'll see that streets like, Green, Reagan, Farquhar, Walnut, Oak are also in there. And you are a small city, so there weren't, over 40, 50 projects that we had to rank against each other. It gets to a point there where you're looking at like decimal percentage, decimal point differences between one project or another. It just means that you do have some obvious corridors that seem to be more important than others, and for when you do decide, to pursue grants and funding in the future. So these 18 projects are depicted on this draft recommendations map. And what you see here, each of the colors coordinate with the bike type that was previously discussed in 2 slides ago. So all the red are your multi-use paths, the blues are your bike lanes, and all the greens are all of the smaller, more low volume residential streets that could be upgraded as bicycle routes. And I do want to point out that there you do see a pink magenta color coding, and those are primarily on the 2 pieces on Catella and Los Alamitos Avenue. Those are just it's a big challenge. We've had many conversations about that intersection and those sections of Catella and Los Alamitos just because of the sheer volume, what it serves, for your community. So we can talk about that a bit more during the open dialogue, but it's part of me being transparent that this intersection and those pieces right there are just it was one of the most difficult things to try to address without for lack of better terms more extreme type of scenarios where in the future you may want to do something. But I don't want to hark on that too much. We can talk about that in a few moments during the open dialogue. But at the end of the day, I feel like everybody was pretty happy and confident, especially after talking to your traffic commission and your planning commission. They all thought that what is being proposed makes sense, that it's the right step forward, that it helps your city pursue and adopt and implement projects that may be low-hanging fruit. And as things change in the future, things are rapidly changing. I mean, especially when we talk about autonomous vehicles and whatnot. I know that seems like a far-fetched idea, but it's a lot closer than we all like to think. Things will change 10, 15 years from now. But remember, an active transportation plan should be updated every 5, 7, 8 years. So it's not the stop all be all. This will hopefully in the near future be updated, be revisited again. Some last things on bicycle infrastructure, things like you'll see in Southern California. The color of pavement is very popular with many communities. It helps, make it obvious where bike routes are. The use of bike boxes, which allow cyclists to get in front of a vehicle, at a red light so that they feel safer. Again, the transition striping at busy intersections or even busy driveways like pictured here. And then wayfinding signage. Little things like that go a long way. So never overlook how the small things can add up in the big picture. For pedestrian recommendations, we were looking at things such as crosswalks, curb extensions, flashers, lighted crosswalks that are pedestrian actuated, and even trying to understand, traffic signal timing adjustment throughout, different intersections. These are what I call the classics. These are like the 4 top things that we always try to look at when we're trying to understand the pedestrian infrastructure at intersections. So for this active transportation plan, what we did is we actually coded the different types of intersections that you have within the city based on the conditions, whether it's in a residential street or whether it's a big intersection, like, Cerritos at Bloomfield. And based on the coding that you see on this map, we have provided in the master plan cut sheets, essentially they're menu items and directions to the types of things that your engineers, your public works department, and your planners can implement once you're ready to make those kinds of implementations. Here's an example of what these pedestrian cut sheets look like. They're coded, as you can see here. So in this example, I purposely used the arterial intersection. This would be something like Cerritos at Bloomfield again. And what we do is we provide visuals and guidance if you had a Cadillac version of all the things that would make this intersection just the most bike and pedestrian friendly thing, this is what you're looking at. And so this allows you to kind of work backwards and be like, okay, well, what can we do this year for this CIP project? But okay, maybe next year we can do the transition striping. Those are the kinds of conversations I hope that this master plan will help you and your staff have over the next 2 to 3 years. Lastly, what's really important, at KTOA, we always provide what we call these project cut sheets. Other plans, sometimes they just have the one map that I showed you earlier, just lines on a map, the type, and that's it, they call it a day. But for this scope of work, we wanted to make sure that we provided you more information so that you're better prepared to make decisions, especially when it comes to budgeting and just trying to work with other engineers in the future on what kind of implementations to make. So all 18 projects in the master plan received a cut sheet. And so these cut sheets are still planning level. They're not engineering designs. They're not meant to be engineering designs, but it provides enough direction for engineers in the future to look at when they want to make improvements. And here's an example of what those cut sheets look like. Here I pulled Cerritos Avenue as an example. It includes a project description. We include infographics. And they're all supported by aerial photographs like this with call outs of the types of recommendations, both bike, ped, and anything that we consider other. So this is great because it allows people like Tom and anybody else who's pursuing a grant to pull these designs out and include them so they can, tell the story of why and what they're trying to do. Lastly, we always include a funding sources section in this active transportation plan. So we have several pages. It's a comprehensive table. This is just a snapshot of that table. But essentially, we're providing guidance on all the different kinds of funding sources available at a local, state, and federal level, so that your staff is aware of when a grant comes out, can something from the ATP, qualify for it. And you can get creative, lots of creative ways to ask for money, grants out there, how you can make connections with walking and biking with other things like stormwater or parks and recreation, which I can elaborate if you'd like me to during the Q&A. But with that, Mayor and council members, I'd like to, again, thank you very much for allowing me this evening to give you an update of everything that's occurred over the last 10 months. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm sure there are many questions. Who would like to go first? Ron, I know you've got, I'm sure, many questions being an avid biker.
Many. Maybe we can start. One, I appreciate all the work that's been done. Very well done. I'm glad about all the participation. And maybe I can just start with the first question. And that is, obviously, with the connection with 2 middle schools, a high school, an elementary school, really active engagement with the school district was critical. And I know you've done some of that. I'm wondering how extensive that has been, and is there any opportunity to maybe do some more of that?
Councilmember, yes, we were really fortunate to have a very involved 2 representatives, one from the PTA, who has strived to do safe routes to school, types of program things, as well as, another staff member from the school district themselves. They participated in all 4 of the advisory committee meetings. And so I'm very thankful for that. I think just having them in the room and understanding that you're pursuing this plan and you're wanting to implement and make change is very important. I I can never stress enough just continue communication. I think this was a good bridge, having them know that this will hopefully be adopted, next month, but that you can continue having those conversations, because the schools and played such a huge role in this active transportation plan because of how small a city you are and all of the schools that you have, especially when you compare your Rossmore, the Rossmore neighborhood, and how they're all trying to travel toward the north to the high school. It created half of the conversations about congestion, on Cerritos and Los Alamitos, and, just talking about culture, like how do we get people to not want to drive all the time? So I would encourage you to continue that communication with them, and I think they'd be more than happy to jump on that. And the one last thing I'd like to say about that is that you do have some of the stakeholders who participate in these advisory committees. Two individuals, one who lives in Rossmore, she multiple times offered her support to, on a volunteer basis, do educational campaigns, bike training, walking training. She's very involved and would love to see these types of improvements continue. So again, kudos to your school district and your stakeholders.
Yeah, she's the president of Lightning Velo Bike Club.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about. Yes.
You're talking about.
Yeah.
I guess my point is, have we gotten, obviously it's our plan and not their plan, but it would sure be nice, and I wonder if there's a process whereby we can send it over and asking them for some thoughts on especially the priority of the projects we're proposing. I think if we had the school district on board, that certainly would increase the probability of funding. And I realize that a lot of the funding is pretty much boilerplate that, are funds that may be available at some time in the future. But certainly if the school district was actively supporting the plan, that would seem to be a plus when it comes to funding. Would that be your thought too?
Exactly. And that's in the narrative. That's explained in the community engagement section of the report. And the next step with that would be, council members, that when you're applying for a grant, such as Caltrans, you remind people in the narrative of the actual application that you had their involvement during the active transportation plan, and then you requested letter of support, because that is like the additional thing that they would be more than happy to write and do for you. So yeah, it becomes now that you have this master plan, it's what comes next. How do you continue to involve them? So like when you're trying to do like Cerritos Avenue improvements, that's when you revisit and you invite them again, next year for like another conversation. Hey, Cerritos Avenue is one of our top 5 projects. Let's talk again. Like what can we do? What has changed? Because remember, the post-COVID world will hopefully also provide more insight when it comes to mobility in generally speaking.
Cypress goes through with some of their developments. Obviously, the impact on Cerritos will be dramatic. So, Mr. Mayor, are you ready for comments on specific projects at this point? Would that be all right? And I can just continue, or would you like to go back and forth? How would you like to do it?
That's fine. I think we can do free-flowing conversation, Ron. We can do questions at any time too. Unless anyone's got a pressing question now, I think, Ron, we can take your comments.
Okay, thank you.
3 questions. Mine might be quick. I can throw my little questions out there. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget them, so I can wait.
That's fine, Councilmember Dovey.
No, go.
Thank you, sir. I noticed when you redid the lanes, they went from like 14 feet to 11 feet. On a thoroughway, 11 feet, that's fine for like big rigs, because Cattell and Los Al are like our major streets. And this is with complete ignorance to how wide streets typically are, but 11 feet that's standard?
Yes, yeah, and that example, that 3D graphic that I had there, that was just hypothetical, but that's a condition that is very common throughout Southern California. But yes, the 11 feet is the accepted minimum traveling widths. Some cities are willing to go down to 10 feet if it's within their own, ordinance and policies. But 11 feet is the absolute minimum, especially knowing that those are truck routes and that you do have big rigs right there.
Okay. Thank you. My second question is, you mentioned neighborhood streets as Farquhar and Green. Farquhar has the base traffic and Green has the fire station. So would those still be considered neighborhood? Because there's big cars that go down, like the big military vehicles go up and down Farquhar, so that would still be considered neighborhood. And then of course our first responder vehicle that goes down Reagan and Green.
Mhm. Yes, council member, those are still technically classified as residential local streets due to the land use and the fact that they're probably no more than 35, 40 feet wide. You are in a very unique and special situation, especially with the base right there, that Farquhar services the traffic flow for, egress and ingress for the base itself. So that's what adds a challenge in terms of just the traffic that exists on Farquhar. But strictly, if we were just stripping it down just because of its width and the land use around it, it is classified as a residential street.
Okay. All right. Then my last question is, how are the maps suggested based on, I'm assuming that the bike lanes, we're wanting the children to use them, but most of our elementary schools are inside of Rossmore, which is not a part of Los Alamitos. So is there, like I looked at the map and it just starts on like Gatella, Los Al. It doesn't account for the inside of Rossmore, which is where the elementary schools are. So is there, or is that like a later thing, or how does that work?
Yeah, so connections to schools is just one element of a comprehensive active transportation plan. And so we were trying to be conscious of the streets that actually go into Rossmore. So whether that's Walnut going into Wallingsford, and then also off of Los Alamitos Boulevard. There's just, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's only 2 actual east-west connections that come out of the mega block of Rossmore. So essentially what that means is that we were able to have connections on Los Alamitos Boulevard and then on Catella, and Wallingsworth. But at that point, it transitions into Rossmore, where generally speaking, after I drove around and I walked part of it, it's all kind of, residential streets. And knowing that it's not within your city boundaries, it's we can only suggest in the narrative that the bikeway projects within Los Alamitos will get people to Rossmore. And so at that point, it's, in a perfect world, it's about perfect communication. What is Rossmore doing so that you can eventually have one map that shows everything. But again, it's another very unique thing where, you have, I think, 5 or 6 elementary schools all within Rossmore, and then you have your one high school outside, as well as, Oak and McAuliffe. And so very unique. And that was just, just if I'm being completely genuine, just one of the bigger challenges with this project was understanding the sheer number of north-south flow and traffic. But remember, schools is very important. I'm not trying to undermine that, but it's also all of the other things, like what are other people, where are they also trying to get to? So whether it's, over to the Cody Creek, San Gabriel River bike path, or whether they're trying to go, east. Those are things that we were trying to balance as well when it came to that.
Done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My questions, Tonya and I were thinking along the same lines, because 2 of my questions and comments are directly related to that. While it's important, that for Oak, that we stop at, the city boundary, I don't think we really can. I mean, I think we have to be talking about crossing Wallingsford when we cross Catella, and how to make that transition from Catella until we hit the bike lane in Rossmore, and the same thing from Los Alamitos Boulevard. And if we need to ask our staff to involve the county in that and work with us on that segment, it seems that's a critical segment when we come to dealing with the schools. So even though, yes, it's in county territory, I don't think we can overlook it. And I think it needs to be at least indirectly a part of this active transportation plan. So I think Tonya was right on the money in identifying that. And I totally agree with that, and hope we can look at it in more detail. And then the second thing, this relates to specifically to Green Street. When you take a look at Green Street from basically Bloomfield to Los Alamitos Boulevard, go drive there in rush hour. I'm telling you, it's a cutoff street. Everybody, once it starts backing up at Catella and Los Alamitos Boulevard, they turn left and use Green Street as a cut-through street to bypass the corner of Los Alamitos and Catella. So I think we need to consider whether or not we want to put bikes on all of Green Street there in terms of the concentration of traffic trying to cut through there, and then maybe go down to Farquhar or Howard to all the way down to Farquhar, in essence, to avoid that intersection at Los Al and Catella. So that would be something else to think about.
Yes.
And then lastly, my comment, and this has to do with I'm kind of an avid bike rider, so I love to talk about cycling. And this has to do with the projects in the north. I think going to the stage of class 1 bicycle lane behind the homes in College Park North and Greenbrook, I'm not sure. I'm not saying to take it off the plan. I'm just not sure it makes a whole lot of sense. And it needs to be clear that we're talking about running if we ever do that, on the south side against the high school, on that side of the channel, going down the channel there, crossing over before you go into Greenbrook to the north side by the district office and connecting to Bloomfield. I think that needs to be made clear in the plan. I like the idea that it would be a nice to have if somebody wants to fund a bridge going over the creek at that point, but I'm not sure it's a real high priority at all. But combined with that, I would say, and I'd like to see it, I think it's down near about 13 now. It seems to me that it could be moved up, the connection between the bike lane along Coyote Creek, coming off the bike lane there at Ball, and improving that exit so you don't almost fall off your bike trying to make that turn to get out of there, and then improving the bike lane along Ball connecting to Bloomfield. I think if you made that improvement, that would make your connection to Bloomfield, and literally that transition would be on major arterial highways, and I think would resolve the access from Coyote Creek to Bloomfield without a problem. And you could do that in both directions on Ball, connecting Bloomfield to the Coyote Creek bike lane. So I would like to see that moved up in the priority list, and the class 1 bike lane through there moved down lower in the priority list. That's just my opinion. Certainly the other council members have their ideas. So those are just some thoughts. Again, I think it was a good job, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I think if we can implement many of those projects, the community will benefit and will definitely become more bike and walking friendly.
Absolutely. You made some really good comments, Councilmember, especially regarding that proposed class 1 on Carbon Creek. And it really was towards the bottom in terms of priority, just because of the expense and how short it is. But yeah, I do appreciate you saying don't take it off, but in the future, as things change and as opportunities come up, that could be something. And it sounds like Ron may have spoken with you, but we did look at where would actually align a proposed class lane, and it would be on the high school side with a prefab bridge that would then jump over. That way you completely avoid any of the residential homes. And so that text is in the report. So in the future, if you come to it, it's at least you can point back to that. And that would maybe quell, any concerns that some of your residents may have about that. I do appreciate you pointing out Ball Road, because that would become an important project. So I will talk with Tom and Ron how we would adjust and move that up a bit more in priority.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and go. And I apologize for looking like Papa Smurf. I don't know what's going on with my lighting here, but I don't have a blue tinge to my skin. Just a couple questions, and I want to preface the first couple of comments just by I enjoy data, but I also want to make sure that we have data that's useful. We get some data points, and what do we do with it? So I was just kind of curious. You mentioned an age demographic in the narrative, and I'm referring to the plan that was in our staff report about 20 to 64-year-olds and the percentage of that. Why wouldn't we, because this is talking about different types of transportation, why wouldn't we have a demographic that's showing, residents under, from 6 to 16, because those are obviously non-drivers, so they're going to be walking, they're going to be biking more. and break it down a little bit more of that, because their age a lot of times will determine their transportation ability. So are we 50% of non-drivers of our residents, that type of thing? And I only play that into because, we have 2 new developments going in over by Oak Middle School. That's adding about 150 housing units. That's going to come with a lot more transportation needs. They're in an area where they can walk to Oak, to the high school, because it's much closer than some of the other areas in the city. They're a little bit farther away. So I just want to make sure that those assumptions are added into our transportation plan, because that could be 500 new children in our community, boom, right there. So I want to make sure that that's at least addressed with some general assumptions about what we think that demographic is going to be for those 2 communities that are being developed. I was kind of curious on the racial demographic. I didn't know what to do with that data when it comes to transportation. I know it's important, but for transportation, will we base decisions based on our racial demographic? I just wasn't sure why that was in there for this scope of work.
Thank you for those questions. That is just standard procedure, Councilwoman, when it comes to just describing the demographics in these ATP reports. And so if it's something that you don't think we should pull out in terms of racial demographics, we can certainly do so. But it becomes a big talking point, especially in other communities. I'll just speak about my experience in Santa Ana, where knowing the Latino demographic, how huge is there, that is a very different scenario than what you have here in Los Alamitos, right? So it's not apples to apples, obviously, but it's just part of what we do is just trying to understand and see what the data looks like. If you think it's too much information and doesn't apply to this, I can speak to my team and just, maybe remove that section of it. But
and I don't think it's that important as far as I'm wanting it removed. I just want to make sure that when we see a data point, okay, now we've got the data, what do we do with it? Are we planning using this data? Are we making decisions using this data? And if we're not, it's interesting, but is it really necessary? But it's not a hill I'm willing to die on by any means. I was just kind of curious.
Okay, thank you.
And then regarding on the Farquhar, Green, and Howard, you're going to hear this over and over again. Farquhar is not a residential street. It's a commercial street that happens to have residential on it. It is the one street that you can go from New Dutch Haven, which is Howard, all the way, do a quick jog over at the base onto Farquhar and get from one side of the city to the other. The only other place you can do that is on Catella. I would say, and I live right by there. I'm about 3 houses down from Farquhar and Carrier Row. I would say 80% of the traffic on Farquhar does not live on Farquhar. They're absolutely using it as a cut through because nobody wants to go on Catella. Now it's coming to the point where nobody wants to go on Farquhar and they're going back to Catella. As far as biking on Farquhar, and I bike a lot, and that's my way out, either over to the bike trail or to the grocery store or whatever. I take my life into my hands on Farquhar much more than I do on Catella. Farquhar, you've got to deal with the opening car doors that they're not paying any attention. People going probably 60 miles an hour there, using the stop signs as suggestions instead of stopping. The also problem that I'm seeing a lot more and more, and it's just polarized more because of COVID, is the delivery trucks that stop literally in the middle of the street. Now, if you're going down Farquhar and you stop in the street, you've got to go to the wrong side of the road to get around them. So I think we've got to address some safety issues before we start throwing bike lanes on there about what delivery, because they're literally, and I've seen it where they don't pull up to the curb even if there's a parking spot. They just stop, or they'll park on the south side of Farquhar, which is a no parking, no stopping, and put their hazards on, and they're all good to go. And once again, it is literally blocking traffic. So those type of issues, I just want to make sure that we address in here because they're safety issues now. And then if we start promoting walking and biking, you're not going to get a lot of buy-in until we can address those safety issues. The other one that we have talked about in the past is the southeast corner of Cerritos and La Salle Boulevard. That's where that El Pollo Loco is, going to the high school. And to cross there, and a lot of students do, those drivers that are turning right, they feel they have the right of way before the pedestrians. And there's a lot of near misses, a lot of students walking there. So that's just another thing we need to address before we start promoting bike and walk to school. So just put that on your kind of, things we need to address. The other biggest issue, and I know that showed up in your slide, is the bike parking. I know when Brew Kitchen came on board, they asked specifically for a bike rack, and it's a cool little, graphic type bike rack and everything. But if you go over to Vaughn's, you have to lock your bike up on one of the benches. We don't have a lot of that. So, I'm looking at, do I really want to, park it and, do it to the, the sanitation station or the bench or whatever. So I want to make sure that bike parking is addressed, because once again, if we're trying to encourage behavior, but we don't bring the safety solutions around it, people aren't going to buy in, and this is all going to be for naught. And then regarding the Rossmore thing, can we use anything? I know years ago, we couldn't annex them or anything, but they came under our sphere of influence. Does that mean anything, or is that just a really cool thing to say? Because when can you activate it, or when does it mean anything? And that's pretty much about it.
I was like, I'll jump in and take that one just for fun. And this is kind of, again, in the larger picture of things, and I think that Councilmember Dobie and Bates and Jacob, you all referred to this, is that we have to ensure that all these connections make sense. We can't just build a self-contained system that doesn't actually take into account Cypress, Seal Beach, and Rossmore. So I think that it's going to be incumbent upon us, once the council is comfortable with these designs and we're in kind of, I'll call it those last 5 yards of actually making changes, that we start to get some input from some of these sister agencies that are around us, so that when we go out and actually search for grants, that they know that, hey, these are improvements that are going to connect to your neighborhoods, connect to your infrastructure, and we have to make sure that they work together. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to make that request. The sphere of influence really speaks to, in the event of annexation, who's got first crack at it, which luckily would be us. That being said, at the moment, it really is just a cool thing to say, sadly. But
okay. And the only reason I bring that up is I know it was brought up before about these pedestrian bridges. And one's in the CIP list. That's the Wallensford one going over from Oak, which is a great idea. And then we added the Cerritos Bridge, the corner that I was just talking about, that. And the only reason I want to understand the positioning with Rossmore and how this works is because you talk to anybody in Rossmore and they're actually demanding that pedestrian bridge, but they're not going to pay for it. That's our dime, because it's our school. So I just want to make sure that going forward, when we make recommendations, that all the stakeholders are involved, and whether that means working with whoever our new district supervisor is going to be, or working with the community services district or something. But anything that happens over on Catella going into Rossmore, there needs to be some skin in the game on both sides.
No, it's an excellent point. And Jacob, maybe you can expand on this for me. With regards to, obviously regional arterials and such, Orange County Transit is going to be the big dog in that conversation. But with regards to these local streets and our connections into unincorporated, Orange County Transportation Authority is still an avenue that we can avail ourselves of, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, they would be between yourselves, county, and OCTA. That would be your triangle of communication once you're trying to start implementing some of these things. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. And this is just, I think it's a good point to just, I know that we've said it before, but I just want to keep reiterating it, is that, once this plan has been finalized, and again, we will make changes to it as time goes on, taking into account different development changes. If the town center is approved in a certain way, that's obviously going to have an impact on what exactly we want to do on the streets. But it's going to be hugely incumbent upon us, just because of the size of our city, to make sure that we have co-signers on all of the grants that we're going to be putting in for. And so having these conversations, pulling everybody into the tent, and putting together kind of a strength in numbers kind of approach to this is going to be the way that we're actually going to be able to hopefully unlock funding for these projects at the end of the day. So you're absolutely right.
Cool. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got. But thank you. The report was very good. I just early in, I tend to have more comments than later on. So
Those were very good comments. I appreciate you taking the time to actually read it, because not every time we have council members actually read the report. So thank you for doing that.
Tanya wants a redo, it sounds like.
Okay, because, and I should know this because, well, between Sherko and I, but I actually sat in the meeting because we both have elementary age children. There were bike lanes in Rossmore, and then they were removed.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody gonna have to remind me, and Jacob, sir, maybe maybe they brought that up when they was talking to you about reintroducing them or how a collaborative effort would work, but they had them and they were removed. So how does that work? We trying to add them again?
Unfortunately, council member, I can't answer that question regarding the history. So I'd have to pass that on to somebody else who has that information.
Yeah, what type of bike lane are you referring to? Because I believe Rossmore has class 3 bike lanes in there.
Yeah, Ron, they removed some of them because the residents around Rossmore Park didn't like them. It was, I wouldn't say it was about the bike lanes more so than people surprisingly living around Rossmore Park were just dumbfounded that they actually had people going to Rossmore Park and parking in front of their house and using their bike lanes. It was a shocker to them. So they made enough of a stink through Community Services District that they had some of them removed.
Yeah, because the PTA got them introduced,
Mm-hmm.
which is why, Jacob, I thought you would know, because I know one PTA bike lady, and she was serious about them bike lanes.
Yeah.
But it was an issue of parking. It boiled down to parking because the bike lanes were open during certain hours, and then people couldn't park their cars in front of their house during those hours.
So they just removed them.
So they removed them. So then it's like, okay, because bike lanes, if you're not going to encourage the children to use them, like Councilmember Hasselbrink was, Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me, let me gather myself, was saying about the 6 to 16. Those are the ones running around. Those are the ones on bikes. And I'm sorry, yeah, you go on the weekends, but during the week, I see children, they bike to school. So that to me would be the more pressing issue. Like, it's great. You can bike up at Dalcatella and Los Al, whatever, but to me, it would be more pressing to be able to bike to school. We have a program for it. We have an event for it. It's a big deal. We do it like walk and bike to school. It's once a month event for every school. So, okay, you said you don't know the answer, and it looks like maybe I should, but I do not, so I apologize. Trying to get somebody else to do my work, my bad.
No, it's okay. I think it's, again, kind of going back to one of the earlier comments I made, just more communication between Rossmore and LaSalle, because from what I've come to learn about Rossmore is that they like to act very independent, even though you provide the main access into their neighborhood. And so it's kind of awkward, if I'm being completely genuine with you, right? With what they do over there with your streets and the public infrastructure. So I wish you luck as you move forward in the future, as you try to, and I'm not saying that facetiously. It's so important because Cattell and Los Alamitos Boulevard, those are the connections into Rossmore. And so if you're not talking to each other, then how can you try to talk about cultural shift and making improvements of people wanting to drive less so that there's less congestion, more so that it's all correlated. It's, I'm not saying culturally speaking, lightheartedly, it's going to take time to change how much we rely on vehicles, but it's little by little, like your city manager was saying, you tackle one project and that will hopefully change things. You tap into your PTA, Safe Routes to School programs, funding from Office of Traffic Safety from the state of California, who can do like bus shelter campaigns and walking trains and biking trains. I mean, these are all things that we've outlined, in the report, but it will take time. And I say good luck in a wholehearted fashion, that it'll be needed.
Awkward's a good word, though. You nailed it.
So, Council, and if I can, and again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but the inroad here is that there's one thing that connects all of us, and that honestly, is that all of the kids, regardless of if they live in Lost Hall or if they live in Rossmore, they all have to use our streets in order to get to school. So the school district is going to be a helpful partner in this if we're going to be successful. That really, truly is something that we're going to have to tap into.
Councilmember Nafolda, any questions or comments?
Just one quick question. On one of the slides, it was on the Catella project. There was that magenta with the X and the dash. I guess further analysis was needed. The next time we see this, is there going to be some recommendation as to what class needs to be? I think it was between Los Al Boulevard and Laurel Park.
Correct, yeah. And so thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember, because that was a conversation that we had to have in detail. The active transportation plan, you know, it's a balance of high-level planning, but with enough detail to get you moving forward to get things done. The reality is that what I came to learn is that that intersection and those bigger chunks, like on Catella between Walnut and I'd say Reagan, or no, Bloomfield, and then essentially Florista down to just south of the Catella Avenue Boulevard. That scenario that you have there, those 7-8 travel lane scenario, dual turn lanes into in and out of truck routes, that is just something so complex and complicated from just a traffic engineering standpoint that our recommendation is, until you make drastic changes, whether it's removing of travel lanes, whether it's, again, this cultural shift that I'm talking about in the future, you will need to have an additional traffic study to conduct so that you can hire traffic engineers and people like us, you know, transportation planners, so we can then revisit that in the future. That's why we try to provide routes that try to kind of circumvent that intersection, because without removing travel lanes, you just can't fit anything there. And I can't, with good conscience, council member, put down a green line to signal a class 3 route through that intersection at Catella and Los Alamitos, because that is just, they would laugh in my face, and I wouldn't want you to laugh in my face either. So after conversations with Tom and Ron, we wanted to just in the plan allude to that. You do need to have additional studies. You need to have tough conversations with OCTA and things about, like, do we need all these travel lanes? And sometimes the answer is yes, because I don't know how it just, that intersection came to be, like that area of just how massive it is. And if other Caltrans projects that are supposedly coming online with the widening of Catella and whatnot, unfortunately, that was not music to my ears. That was the complete opposite. It's just going to complicate even more your situation that you have at what you see in the magenta colors. So, you know, I can talk to Tom and Ron a little bit more, but our recommendation was to have additional studies in the future. In the meantime, here are other routes that will hopefully help, you know, having that transition for more walkable and bikeable to avoid that section of that intersection. Yeah, Ron, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that a bit more. I know we talked quite a bit about that intersection and how that affects, or if that was good enough for this.
No, you did a good. The only thing I want to also add is that intersection is also part of the traffic town center mixed use plan that we're doing. So because of that, we're trying to integrate all the plans together. The town center, the ATP, and of course we got the 605 interchange coming down Catella as well. So all three of those plans has to kind of meld and work cohesively to make a good intersection. So that's why we're waiting and advising that there's further study needed on that, particularly that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, thank you for your question.
Just one quick question. All of the projects have a cost estimate, you know, basically to be determined. What's the timeline looking on getting estimates for that? And then once we do have estimates, you know, how much does funding typically or grants typically take care of versus city funding, general fund dollars? I know there's no, you know, just in a typical scenario or an average scenario, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mayor, I have the cost estimates ready. Those were completed at the end of last week, and so that's something I'm going to forward over to Ron and Tom. These are planning level cost estimates using actual built infrastructure prices from projects in Orange County, LA, San Diego. I include a nice generous contingency buffer, because from one year to another, you know very well, the cost of like steel or asphalt or concrete can change dramatically. So I purposely have a nice buffer there to accommodate and account for whether this is a project that's going to go in next year or 5 years from now. But those will be provided to you. And, you know, I will make sure to email them over to your staff tomorrow morning. But that'll be included in this. And depending on the grant, there are some grants have actual caps with how much they could award. But the very successful and really important active transportation program that the state of California has awards grants in all kinds of phases, whether you're pursuing a grant to do an additional feasibility study. So you could apply for a grant to look at Cattell and Los Al, you know, in 1 or 2 years. But you could also apply for infrastructure grants that could, into the millions of dollars, actually build projects. And so it just depends on the grant source itself, but it could be as small as a couple, you know, $100,000 to over $1 million. It just depends. And I have Joe here on the line too. Joe, if you don't mind jumping in, since you know numbers a little bit better than I do.
Yeah, good evening, City Council. My name is Joe Punsalon. I'm with K2OA. I work with Jacob. And in terms of the grant process, for example, the just last year when the Caltrans ATP program was released, you can, like Jacob said, you can actually ask for as much as you want for certain projects. So they break them down into small infrastructure, non-infrastructure. So if you wanted to do a planning study for Catella Los Al intersection, that's one part of the program. That I believe has a max of like $500,000 for the planning study itself. And then you have small, medium, and large infrastructure. So it breaks down from 0 to 7, 7 to 14. And I think anything over 14, oh no, I'm sorry, 0 to 3.5, 3.5 to 7 is medium. Anything over 7 million is a large infrastructure project. They don't necessarily require a city match, but you get additional points in your application if you do provide some sort of match. And the match also depends on a percentage that you're adding to the project. So there's all these different metrics and rubrics that's associated with that. So when you do apply for an application, those are some things that you need to consider. But at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to provide funding for a program such as that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, City Manager Simmons.
Sorry, sir. And I just wanted to follow up too. So one of the things that we will do is when we start to look for different grants, we'll look for how exactly they're, not just what exactly the grant provides for, but how exactly they score them. And so if we look and see, well, okay, cities that are providing, let's say 10% of matching funds, they put you into this category or it gets you this many points. We would look into those type of scenarios and try to make sure that we give ourselves the best chance of actually being awarded the grant. And so those would come with, you know, general fund dollars attached to them. But the upside obviously being that you can leverage a $30,000 investment and hopefully get, you know, a $600,000, $700,000 grant out of it. So it's going to be a lot of tough math going forward once this thing is approved. And again, that's the important thing to remember. This is the first step in this process. Getting the plan in place, doing the outreach, connecting with all of our partners, and then going after all those grant dollars and seeing what exactly we're able to put on the street at the end of the day.
Thank you. Is the idea to get the final version of the active transportation plan before the council in March?
As soon as we can. The one thing that I do want to do, and again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, is I want to make sure that we do have an opportunity to start looking at some of the grant opportunities that are out there and ensure that we're not missing any pieces. I have complete confidence in the team. That we've, you know, dotted all the T's and dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. Reverse that. But I want to make sure that we're taking into account the changing landscape within the grant application world, because if there's something that we're missing, I'd hate to have to come back and do this all over again.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bates.
Yeah, just one quick comment. I'll keep it brief. Is just as a point of kind of knowledge for everybody, I head south down the Coyote Creek to where it joins the San Gabriel River Bike Trail, heading south to PCH and then on from there. My point being is what I've noticed pretty consistently now is kids going to the middle school, coming up the San Gabriel River Bike Trail from Seal Beach to connect to, I'm assuming it's to get to Oak to go to middle school. So they're using the San Gabriel River Bike Trail to get clear from Seal Beach all the way up. And then continuing that thinking, more and more people who ride a lot, who have used Cerritos in the past, are going all the way up to Ball to try to make that connection to head east all the way into Cypress and clear, over to Stanton and toward the Anaheim area, just because they're avoiding Cerritos as Cerritos becomes more crowded and you've got the high school right there. So that Ball road heading east is becoming more of a bike thoroughfare also. Enough said. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have a vote on this, right? We're just receiving, and we'll come back to this potentially next month. Is that right, City Clerk Quintanar?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Joe. With that, our meeting is adjourned at 7:36 p.m.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you all.
See you guys later.
Thank you, everyone.